séance. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 63 du comité permanent du patrimoine canadien. Je voudrais reconnaître que cette réunion a lieu sur le territoire traditionnel et non cédé des peuples Algonquin and Anishinaabe. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of Thursday, June the 23rd, 2022. Now, while public health authorities and the Board of Internal Economy no longer require mask wearing indoors, masks and respirators are still excellent tools to prevent the spread of COVID-19 and other respiratory diseases. So their use is encouraged. I want to take this opportunity to remind all participants of some basic housekeeping. That you cannot take screenshots or photos of your screen, and that the proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website so that you don't really need to take screenshots. There is also a globe at the bottom of your screen for those who are on Zoom, and if you press it, you can get translation in English, in French, or in original. Any questions or discussion should be directed through the chair, and please do not speak until I recognize you by name. So, pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, September the 20th, 2022, this committee is meeting to continue its study on safe sport in Canada. Our witnesses today
Madam Chair, before we get into that, I was wondering if I could have a point of order. It's Kevin.
Go ahead. Yes? Oh, I recognize that radio voice anyway, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thanks to everyone around the table. As you know, we did a motion Monday asking for the redacted letter, the redacted report Heenan Hutchinson Robitaille gave to Hockey Canada several weeks ago, redacted by the law clerk, and we all got notice now that the letter is not here, which is a major disappointment. And seeing further reports today that, in fact, the government may reinstate funding to Hockey Canada is even more of a challenge now. But we read the letter. I'm very disappointed in it. I would like to have 20 minutes after the meeting closed, if we could, on camera, to discuss what we should do to bring the next action forward. I'm just going to say this. I have seen the names being mentioned in several news articles in the last 2 weeks, or 2 days rather. And it's none of us, because we've not seen anything. We haven't got the reports. The media wants this, but more importantly for me, Hockey Canada has to be transparent. And I'm really disappointed in the letter we received, Madam Chair, from Andrew Winton. And I would like to go into camera 20 minutes after, or the last 20 minutes of today, after we're done with Soccer Canada, and discuss what we should do going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Waugh. I think your motion had been passed unanimously when it was brought forward. And so is there anyone opposing 20 minutes at the end of the meeting to discuss these issues?
Madam Chair,
if you are opposing, please put your hand up. Peter Julian? Peter?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the same point of order, I was quite perturbed, like Mr. Waugh is, that we had an order from this committee that was being disregarded by Hockey Canada. I think it's fair to say that you'll recall, Madam Chair, when we originally started to convene Hockey Canada to answer questions, many of the questions they were reluctant to answer because of the report coming forward. And it seems to me disingenuous that they weren't willing to answer questions then, now seem to be less interested in providing the report to us, though we do have the ability to ensure that we get a copy of that report. I think this committee has worked in a very admirable way, in a way that is very rare on Parliament Hill, all members of all parties working together. And certainly we've had information disclosed to us that we have not revealed. So I certainly support Mr. Waugh in having an in-camera discussion later on in this meeting to resolve that. But my own feeling is Hockey Canada has repeatedly spoken of the report in the context of not being able to provide information until the report is completed. And I believe we should be pushing Hockey Canada to provide that report.
So you are supporting Mr. Waugh's suggestion. I'm asking if there is anyone who is opposed to Mr. Waugh's suggestion.
Mr. Housefather has his hand up.
Anthony?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do want to get to Soccer Canada and the witnesses, and I'm in support of Mr. Waugh's proposal to do in camera, but I wanted to just correct. I feel compelled to correct. Hockey Canada in its letter did not say that they would not provide the report. They said that if the committee wanted the report, despite the concerns that they expressed to the committee, they would provide the report. And I don't want it to be unfairly portrayed that they refused to provide the report. The letter is very clear that they will provide the report. They wanted to express concerns to the committee. I believe there's a way of managing receiving the report and also addressing the confidentiality concerns that perhaps Hockey Canada is concerned about. Certainly, nobody on this committee wishes to impede the prosecutions, potentially by the London Police or by Hockey Canada itself investigating its own players. And I'm sure there's a way that we often do of retaining the documents as confidential by viewing them in certain ways that can alleviate everybody's concerns. But I just didn't want anybody to believe that Hockey Canada said they refused to provide it. They said they would provide it. They just wanted to express concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. I just wanted to reassure the committee that if you recall, before we began the study on Hockey Canada, we met with the law clerk, and the law clerk explained to us that we could do this by maintaining confidentiality and still get confidential information. So I just wanted to reiterate what Anthony is saying. Sébastien.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will add my voice to those who say that we should go ahead with the meeting. I think it's absolutely necessary that the committee state its wish and will, and I would also like us to get back to the refunding, the public funding of Hockey Canada. As I understand it, the requirements weren't really very convincing, and I think that if we can look at this again, it would be helpful for us.
Oh, Madam Chair, you're on mute.
Sorry, thank you, Sébastien. That still does not tell me if there is unanimous consent or if there is opposition to Mr. Waugh's motion. Consent, I see your thumb up, Sébastien. So is there anyone opposed? No, I think he's just asking to discuss it in camera, that's all. So I think, clerk and everyone in agreement, we will end the meeting with our witnesses with 20 minutes to 20 minutes to spare. Can 15 do, Kevin?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, Madam Clerk, it takes about 5 to 7 minutes for us to switch over to in-camera.
To get into, yeah, okay, so 20 minutes then. And so we will now continue to listen to our witnesses. And as I was about to say, that our witnesses today are, as individuals, Nick Bontis, former president, Canada Soccer. He's on by video conference. Vittorio Montagliani, President, Confederation of North, Central America and Caribbean Association Football by video conference. Sean Heffernan, Chief Financial Officer by video conference. And now I just wanted to let witnesses know that if you are as individuals, you each have 5 minutes. If you are as a group, the group has 5 minutes. But I will give you a 30-minute shout out, and I mean that literally, when you have 30 minutes left so you can wrap up your statement. And we begin now with opening remarks from Dr. Nick Bontis for 5 minutes. The floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of this committee for the invitation to testify today. My name is Nick Bontis. I am a professor of strategy at the DeGroote School of Business at McMaster University, where I've been teaching for 25 years. Outside of my university duties, I've devoted most of my volunteer time to soccer. I was first elected to the board of directors of Canada Soccer in 2012, and most recently had the privilege to serve as president. I stepped down last month as Canada Soccer was in advanced talks on a new collective bargaining agreement with the men's and women's national team. I believe that this agreement will be a landmark achievement that sets Canada apart from virtually every other FIFA member association in the world. I advocated for pay equity publicly from the first day I was elected president and did so throughout my term. Serving as a volunteer for Canada Soccer and witnessing the progress and achievements of Canada's national teams has given me some of the proudest moments of my life. I've been playing soccer for 46 years, and it has contributed so much to who I am today. It guided me during my younger years at the youth club level. Then it allowed me to develop my leadership skills when I played at university and as an adult. Even in recent years, soccer is still a social pastime that keeps me fit with my fellow old-timers on the weekends. My experience as a youth coach and how sport helps and shapes how young people develop mirrors my passion as a lifelong educator in a safe environment. With this in mind, I wanted to address Christine Sinclair's comments at this committee when she testified a few weeks ago. While I do not recall using the language she referenced, I don't dispute it, and my exact choice of words is not the point. What matters is that she felt that I treated her concerns disrespectfully. I feel terrible about making her feel this way, and I've since communicated with Christine and her agent to apologize personally. It was a mistake, I take responsibility for it, and I regret it. Few people have done more for soccer or women's sport in this country than Christine. She has not only inspired millions of young soccer players around the world, she inspired me as a player, as a coach, and as an administrator. Unlocking the full potential of players who want to follow in Christine's footsteps was a large part of why I got involved with Canada Soccer. Before I conclude, I wanted to express my thanks to the chair and members of this committee for allowing me to delay my appearance until today. I think members of Parliament will have a special understanding for the circumstances that made it extremely difficult for me to testify last week. As you may know from media reports, for the past 14 months, I've been the target of sustained harassment by a disturbed individual who issued threats and abuse toward me, my wife, and my 3 children. During that time, I received over 280 emails. My wife was subjected to numerous abusive phone calls, and my children received unwanted messages and were subjected to social media abuse. Ultimately, I work with a panic button under my desk in my office here at McMaster. Plainclothes police officers were stationed in the atrium of my building as the harasser continued to ignore warnings and the cease and desist order that was issued to him. The situation escalated and intensified significantly in recent months to the point that a judge issued a search warrant, law enforcement confirmed his online identity, and he was ultimately charged with criminal harassment. However, days before he was set to appear, I was notified by the primary investigator that he had succumbed to his mental illness by taking his own life. The legal matter was scheduled to be heard in court today. Those of us who aren't used to being in the public glare read about this kind of situation, but nothing can prepare you for it. Every day I worried about the safety of my wife and kids. This may be something that politicians and your families can relate to, but I was not prepared for this. It was not in the job description. I'm still processing these extremely distressing events. Unfortunately, the abuse continues by others. So I appreciate the committee's patience in allowing me to defer my appearance until today. And I want to thank Madam Chair for your compassion in my case. As for today's hearing, I welcome the opportunity to talk about Canada Soccer. I believe the future of our sport has never been brighter. There is so much to look forward to in the next few years. We have an amazing opportunity to unlock the potential of the millions of Canadians that love and support our game. Thank you.
Vous êtes en sourdine, Madame la Présidente.
I'm afraid, Madam Chair, that you are on mute.
Sorry, I shouldn't mute myself at all. But I know you all wish I would mute myself. So, Mr. Montigliani, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for the invitation to speak to you today. My name is Victor Montagliani. I've had the privilege of being involved in soccer, or football as I call it, in this country and internationally for over 30 years. I began as a player and later served in various roles as a volunteer in the game, beginning as a grassroots coach and other positions in the province of British Columbia, until I eventually was elected to the volunteer position of president of the Canadian Soccer Association in 2012. Given what I have observed and experienced in the evolution of the game over the past 30 years, I wanted to briefly provide the committee my perspective on the development and heritage of football in Canada. For as long as I've been involved, football in this country has fought an uphill battle. As a sport that has long roots among immigrant communities in our country, like the one I grew up in East Vancouver, the domestic game has faced challenges in attracting meaningful support from this country's media and corporate establishment. It is not about the participation or enthusiasm. We know that we are the biggest participation sport in Canada. During my 5 years as volunteer president of Canada Soccer 2012 to 2017, the lack of interest and support from media corporations meant that Canada Soccer had to spend its own money for our women and men's national teams to be shown on networks such as TSN, Rogers, and CBC, rather than allocating that to the grassroots. To be clear, these expenditures over a decade did allow our fans to catch 95% of Christine Sinclair's goals and 100% of Dwayne De Rosario's goals, which would not have been the case. However, it is important to know where we stood in 2011 and early 2012. We had no sovereignty and no equity in our own game. We had absolutely no domestic media market. We had very little professionalization and zero industry of football in Canada. And we had zero relevancy in the international arena, especially in FIFA and in CONCACAF. We needed to shift our mindset and shift it fast. Since then, we became founding partners of the NWSL with U.S. Soccer and the Mexican Federation, subsidizing the salaries of our women national team players so they could prepare for the 2015 Women's World Cup and 2016 Olympics. We hosted the Women's World Cup in 2015, to this day, still the greatest Women's World Cup in history. We embarked on bidding for the 2026 Men's World Cup, which we successfully won in 2018. And we created an environment where investors could come in and start a Canadian Premier League, which also has now set the groundwork for what we hope will be further investors for a Canadian Women's Professional League. And of course, this has all been underpinned by the fantastic players in our country, our women's team and our men's team who have won bronze, gold, and obviously the qualification to Qatar 2022. Of course, Canadian corporations are private entities and can make choices as they wish. But it was obvious when I was president of Canada Soccer, we needed to take a different route and seek out new commercial partners, not only to encourage investment, but to encourage ambition. That meant looking beyond the usual suspects to find new, more dynamic partners with appetite and willingness to build domestic football for the long term. The arrival of the new streaming platforms has provided great news for unlocking commercial opportunities that will help the game in Canada, as well as in CONCACAF and in FIFA when the next rights cycles come up. Not only are these platforms shaking up the market, they're enabling us to make long-term investments in the areas that have held the game back in Canada, namely infrastructure. The discussions between Canada Soccer and what became the Canada Soccer business were focused on providing long-term benefits for the growth of the game. No one would ever claim that every decision made or action taken was perfect. However, we must recognize the sacrifice and courage of the Canada Soccer family volunteers, our coaches, and ultimately our fantastic players who have allowed where this has been allowed, where both the men and women's programs have broken through the tier 1 ceiling of global football in the last decade. We have the Women's World Cup around the corner, and we have now the men qualifying for the CONCACAF Nations League for the first time in our history. Canada's future in this sport is very bright. And with that context, I look forward to discussing football with this committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Montigliani. I'm sorry that I did not recognize that the G in your name was silent. So I apologize for mispronouncing it.
No,
Thank
that's
you.
fine.
And we now go to the final witness, who is Sean Heffernan, Chief Financial Officer. Mr. Heffernan, for 5 minutes, please.
Hello, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I'm Sean Heffernan, Chief Financial Officer at Canada Soccer. As you know, Canada Soccer is the governing body for the sport of soccer in our country. As a member of Canada Soccer's senior management team, I support Canada Soccer's mission to grow soccer in our country from the grassroots to the national levels. My core responsibility is to oversee Canada Soccer's finances, including financial operations, planning, risks, reporting, and record keeping. I'm also responsible for reporting to the Canada Soccer Board of Directors on financial topics. Additionally, since the association has a small team, I give general business advice about operational topics to the General Secretary. My remarks today focus on three areas specifically. One, my role in the negotiations of the agreement with the Canada Soccer Business, or CSP. Two, Canada Soccer's financial statements and filings. And three, Canada Soccer's transparency in providing the senior national teams with financial information. Regarding the CSP agreement, the agreement provides valuable broadcast and streaming opportunities for both senior national teams, guarantees annual payments to Canada Soccer, and has secured new partners for investment in grassroots and high-performance soccer in Canada. From December 1st, 2018, until the agreement was approved on February 7th, 2019, I was a member of the Canada Soccer negotiating team for the agreement. Prior to that, I provided advice on earlier drafts of the agreement. The negotiating team worked on four specific limited issues for the agreement, namely term and renewal, signatories of sponsorship contracts, control of the Canada Soccer brand, and determining acceptable broadcast mediums. Neither the negotiating team nor I had decision-making power about the agreement. Rather, the team negotiated on the previously mentioned issues, presented the negotiation outcomes to the Board of Directors, and answered questions from the Board. As has been noted publicly, including to this committee by Canada Soccer's General Secretary, the CSP agreement has some shortcomings, including the length of the agreement, the unilateral term extension option for CSP, and the limited ability for Canada Soccer to share in upside revenue. To resolve those issues and build a healthier financial future for soccer in our country, Canada Soccer is developing a revenue-focused operating plan and holding discussions to amend the CSP agreement. With respect to the financial statements and filings, Canada Soccer has always valued transparency, and our intention is always to be compliant with all applicable laws. As such, I want to speak to Canada Soccer's filing with Corporations Canada as the topic came up with the committee on March 20th. I assure you those filings were made every year during my tenure as Chief Financial Officer. While Canada Soccer has submitted annual Corporations Canada filings indicating changes in board membership and other administrative requirements under those regulations, our filings should have included the financial statements, which we did not provide. Canada Soccer's financial statements are now uploaded on the Corporation Canada's website. The late submission for those statements to Corporations Canada is regrettable, and I accept responsibility for that error. But Canada Soccer has otherwise always exercised a high standard of financial transparency. This is further illustrated by Canada Soccer's practice of publishing audited financial statements on our website. Those statements are also provided to Sport Canada, our members, and our partners. Finally, I wish to touch on my role in providing the senior national teams financial information related to Canada Soccer. As the committee heard on March 20th, Canada Soccer has been negotiating towards collective bargaining agreements with the men's and women's national teams since June 2022. Those agreements are based on the core principle of equal pay and will compensate each team at a world-class level. During those negotiations, I've helped provide the teams and their representatives with detailed financial information, audited financial statements, and breakdowns of Canada Soccer spending and budgeting processes. I continue to work on providing all follow-up information requested by the teams. The players and their representatives have always been welcome to ask me any questions. I know the government is considering new reporting and transparency requirements for national sport organizations, and Canada Soccer would welcome the direction from the Minister of Sport on that topic.
30 seconds.
Thank you very much for your attention, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heffernan. And now we go to the part of the meeting where there's a question and answer session. And the question and answer will include the time, so they're not separate times. And so for the first round, which is a 6-minute question and answer session, we begin with the Conservatives. Kevin Waugh. Kevin, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our guests. Mr. Bontis, I'll start with you. Why did you step down? Was it after the meeting here in Ottawa where the provincial associations demand that you leave as president of Canada Soccer?
Yes, that is correct. I received a message from the chairman of the President's Forum. I contacted him with the General Secretary. They requested my resignation. I asked them if it was possible if I could have a meeting to explain myself or get further clarification on the reasons for the resignation. They declined that request. I then contacted my board and tendered my resignation.
What was the issue? What was the issue with the provincial associations that from that meeting that you had here in Ottawa that they asked you to leave?
I don't know. I asked them for an explanation. I wanted to set up a Zoom call. I made an explicit request to set up a Zoom call either later that evening or the following night to speak to the presidents. The last time I had spoken to them was 2 weeks prior. I have instituted a policy where I had a bi-monthly Zoom call with all the provincial presidents to discuss all the issues at hand with myself and the senior staff. So we had one scheduled 2 weeks prior. There was no mention at all in that meeting 2 weeks prior that there was going to be an issue with regards to my tenure. So again, I found out that morning and I tendered my resignation.
So are you saying they ganged up on you? I mean, this is strange. You come to Ottawa for a meeting and all the sport organizations, just not one, all the provincial bodies demand that you leave. There had to be something beforehand that triggered this.
Yeah,
so tell us about it.
So I was not in Ottawa. I was away actually supporting our U17 boys team in Guatemala. I found out about the request for resignation while I was still in Guatemala. And I, flew home later that evening after I tendered my resignation that day.
So when talking to several sport organizations in this country, it's $9 for each player that goes to registration to Canada Soccer. They obviously feel money-wise there is an issue with Canada Soccer, not only with the Canada Soccer business, but, you just don't walk into a meeting here, everybody fly to Ottawa, and then a day later, they're looking for a new president. So there must be some underlingings in the grassroots, because this is where this started, that terminated your contract with Soccer Canada. Can you shed anything on this?
No, I'm not aware. As I said before, I asked for reasons. I wanted an explicit opportunity to actually have both them explain it to me and for me to explain where we were at in addition to my presidency, and I was not afforded that opportunity. So at that point, I tendered my resignation.
So you were president under tumultuous times. We had great times in soccer, thanks to the women's program winning gold in Tokyo, the men's qualifying for the World Cup. And yet those two teams in particular are more upset with Canada Soccer than ever before. The men's team didn't want to take to the field in Vancouver. The women's team didn't want to take to the field in the United States. So instead of grassroots kicking you out, we also have top-down. So what is the problem with Canada Soccer and the national teams? And I know Mr. Heffernan started talking about negotiations that are coming up to 2 years now, which is not a good situation. But why is it that soccer is going to become, if it hasn't already, the #1 sport in this country, and yet the turmoil in the board has never been so toxic as we've seen it?
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, when I was elected president, it was during a global pandemic. It was a perfect storm. There was no soccer being played in this country at the grassroots level. Even our national teams had to go through World Cup qualification and tournaments. We were forced, because of the policies of health in this country, to actually play our home games for World Cup qualification in the U.S., in Chicago and in Florida. We had no fans. We had no opportunity to make revenue on those games. But the one thing that I do want to clarify that I was explicit with from day one of my presidency was that I would not move forward with any new agreement unless it had pay equity baked in. And I actually communicated that to the leaders of the women's national team, the four women that you saw. In addition to their legal counsel, I had a Zoom call with them and through General Secretary. And I said to them that I was going to support pay equity. Several months later, in June, as you pointed out, I met with the men's players prior to the scheduled Panama match. I communicated with them also that I was 100% only going to support a deal that had pay equity baked in. The decision for them to boycott that match was theirs. I don't know what the reasons were, but I've maintained that position. We continued our negotiations throughout the summer. We've continued our negotiations through the fall and winter.
You're no longer involved. So you didn't.
I'm no longer
now.
correct.
That's right.
No. I meant through the summer and the winter, but I am no longer involved. I resigned a month ago. But my understanding is that through Sean Heffernan's statement that he is now leading the charge to provide them with all the information that they require.
Thank you. My time's up.
We now go to the Liberals. Anthony Housefather, 6 minutes, please, Anthony.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today. It's appreciated. Mr. Bontis, I'm very sorry about what you've gone through recently, and thank you for your fulsome apology to Christine Sinclair. I think it was very genuine, and I want to thank you for that. I'm going to start with some questions about your opening statements. First of all, both you, Mr. Bontis, and you, Mr. Montigliani, mentioned your volunteerism. Thank you for your many years of volunteer service. Mr. Montigliani, how much money did you earn from CONCACAF and FIFA in the last year?
We have a CONCACAF have a very rigorous compensation committee.
Okay, can you give me a ballpark number, please?
Yeah, I'm explaining to you first the process.
Explain. I want to know the ballpark number,
policies,
please. I want to know the ballpark number.
Let me answer the question. I'm more than happy to discuss that. We have a policy at CONCACAF. We have an independent committee that sets the compensation
Mr. Montigliani, I want a number,
council.
please.
I'm describing it.
I don't care
right
about your description. I want the number, please. I think everybody here is aware that you can describe how you're compensated. I didn't ask the question. I asked, how much money did you earn from CONCACAF and FIFA in the last year?
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, we have a policy at CONCACAF to not.
Madam Chair, I would ask you to
disclose.
instruct the witness to kindly answer the question.
I am answering the question.
No, you're
we
not.
have a policy, and the reason we have the policy is for security and safety reasons because of the Confederation has security and safety issues throughout our Confederation. Unfortunately, not every country is like our country in Canada.
Madam Chair, the witness is now not answering the question. I would ask you to please instruct the witness who may not understand that he's under oath before the committee, whether or not he's taking an oath. I'm asking for a number. I'm not asking for anything else.
We do not have a great deal of time, Mr. Montigliani, so that if the questioner asks you to give a concise answer, just please say the amount that he asked you so we can move on.
Yes, Madam Chair. The issue is that the organization that I am the president of has a policy with respect to not disclosing that number.
You are not going to disclose the number, all right?
Mr. Montigliani, it's been reported that you earned $2 million from soccer in 2019. Your combination of roles at CONCACAF and FIFA would lead to the assumption that you're earning a considerable amount of money from soccer. And your comments about being a volunteer, you may well have been a volunteer, but it's led you into a very lucrative job at soccer. You're refusing to say the number. I'm going to change to Mr. Bontis. Mr. Bontis, how much do you earn from CONCACAF now that you're on the executive of CONCACAF?
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, I'm uncomfortable in sharing that number for privacy reasons. It is correct that for the 11 years that I was at Canada Soccer, I was a volunteer. And for the time that I've been at CONCACAF, there is a stipend that is calculated by an independent compensation committee.
It's been reported that the amount is, north of $125,000. So in any case, I'm saying, gentlemen, I will get back to this question because I think it is relevant in terms of the amounts of money that you guys are earning versus what the women on the national team and the men on the national team are receiving from Canada Soccer. Mr. Monteliani, you talked about the 2015 World Cup in your opening statements about how this was the greatest World Cup. How do you react to Hampton Dellinger, the Assistant Attorney General in the United States, who was so appalled by Canada Soccer's behavior over the turf war, where you refused, this was the only World Cup that was ever not played on natural grass, it was played on turf. And he said that reparation payments should be offered to the women athletes and that Canada should be eliminated as a candidate for hosting Men's World Cup because of their failure to properly host the women's tournament. Why did you not allow natural grass to be used, and why did Canada Soccer refuse that?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. It wasn't a decision by Canada Soccer. It was a decision by FIFA, who at that point allowed World Cup to be played on either natural grass or artificial turf.
So wait, Mr. Monteliani, so you're saying it was a decision by FIFA. So FIFA ordered Canada to host this one tournament on turf, even though every World Cup before and after was hosted on grass?
There was other World Cups, mainly youth World Cups that were hosted.
I did not refer to youth World Cups, Mr. Monteliani. I'm talking about the men's and women's World Cups. You hosted the Women's World Cup on a surface that no World Cup has ever been hosted on before or since, and now you told me in your sworn testimony that FIFA told you to do it. Please produce to the committee the letter that FIFA sent to you or Canada Soccer ordering you to host the tournament on turf.
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, the decision to host the tournament on whatever surface is a decision made by FIFA. Part of that decision was also a legacy decision where 24 pitches were built in Canada, all turf, that are still being used by our community footballers. The decision was made by FIFA. It wasn't
Again, I would ask you to please, Mr. Monteliani, it's my time. I would ask you to please produce to the committee any proof that you or Canada Soccer has that FIFA told you to host the tournament on turf. I'm going to move now to Mr. Heffernan. Mr. Heffernan, you were talking about the negotiating committee for an agreement that we'll be talking about a lot today, the CSB agreement. And you said the negotiating committee had 4 limited things that it was told to negotiate. But the agreement is multifaceted with over, dozens and dozens of clauses. Why did the negotiating team only have 4 things that it negotiated? You're basically saying that those other things were either forced on you or negotiated prior to the negotiating committee being given the mandate. Please explain to me how the negotiating committee could only negotiate 4 parts of a very, very big multi-pronged agreement.
The committee came into form in December of 2018. The discussions with CSB were taking over a year and a half across that time frame before that, where substantial parts have already been negotiated before the committee was given the task of.
That's what I was asking. Who negotiated the original? Who negotiated the original parts of the agreement?
Sorry, Mr. Housefather and Mr. Heffernan, you are now 30 seconds over time. So can you please give a 3-second answer?
Who negotiated the parts before, Mr. Heffernan?
There were a couple of times, as illustrated in the letter that was provided to the committee earlier today, which described the different stages of which different groups of people were involved in it.
We have not received it.
If I'm to answer quickly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Encore en sourdine, Madame la Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will begin with Mr. Bontis. Despite what you mentioned in your opening statement, and I would like to get back to it, Ms. Chris St. Clair said that in the past we had no money, but both men and women were in the same position. Now we must fight for equality. We're not bitter about the men's team. They've made great headway for the national team, and they back us in our requests. Mr. Bontis, when it comes to pay equity then, equal pay, we know that there is quite a gap. There's also a gap in the right to play. Why did you create a league, a men's league, but not create a women's league at the same time? When did you finally think of it? It really seems that women come second in the world of Canada soccer.
Thank you for the question. Madam Chair, with regards to the issue of men versus women's league, it's not men versus or men or, it's an issue of sequencing. In fact, as was testified earlier, the first investment that Canada Soccer made to a league was in the National Women's Soccer League. For almost 9 or 10 years, if I recall, we subsidized the compensation of our national team players in that league. That league occurred before the actual arrangement of the CSB and the CPL League. Let me also clarify that Canada Soccer does not own or operate or run leagues. What we do is sanction leagues. Private investors come in, we have a minimum standard of standards that are required to launch a league, and then those investors. So the sequencing is actually our investment in the NWSL for approximately 9 or 10 years. Then the CPL came into play, which, yes, is a men's league, but that was also as a precursor for our bid to host the Men's World Cup in 2026. And then is the opportunity that we found at Canada Soccer to now prioritize the development of a women's league. We appointed, a head of women's professional soccer at Canada Soccer so that she can liaise with private investors so that there is a smooth transition to what sanctioning will be necessary for the proposed new women's league, where there is one group of investors, one Project 8 group that is expecting to kick a ball in a couple of years' time.
You're mentioning private investors, but we also feel that the profits are private as well. So the money that is held by other groups should have gone to the Women's League. Mr. Montigliani, you say that we should pay attention to the process. So let's go for that. You had this brilliant idea to convince the board of directors to give up its assets, and the American team gave you this idea. Who advised you from the American team?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. It wasn't the American team per se, the American team that advised us. The premise and the principles of what was started when I was exiting as president was very similar to, if not identical to, what has transpired in the U.S. under what's called Strategic United Marketing, SUM. It was a 25-year relationship between SUM and U.S. Soccer, which also not only obviously created the Major League Soccer, as we know, with 3 of our own Canadian teams in there, but also produced a multi-billion-dollar industry in the game. So it wasn't the American team.
Did someone in your board of directors, when you discussed this with them, stand up for the idea that women's soccer should also be a priority topic in the agreements, that a women's league should be created as well?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The issue of creating a women's league was never not discussed. In fact, it was important, and as Nick Bontis already said, we had committed significant resources to ensuring that our women's national team was playing in, at that time, a very top league, the NWSL, and obviously still is a top league. And what the sequencing was is by creating the CPL shortly thereafter, and we're only 3 years after the kickoff, that the environment would be created to bring on investors to create a women's league, which by the looks of it, with the initiative of Project 8, looks like it's going to hopefully be a reality.
So we didn't in any way feel that there were any requests that got a hearing to ensure that the Women's Soccer League be able to get their part of the sponsorship. Why prevent them from getting their part of the sponsorship?
Who is the question addressed to?
Vous pouvez répondre, Monsieur Montigliani.
You can answer, Mr. Montigliani.
Thank you. The question of sponsorship, any agreements, whether it's the SUM agreement or the CSB agreement, those are sponsorship agreements. We were leaving a sponsorship agreement with IMG previously, which was obviously a lot less. It wasn't so much about sponsors. Thank you. To create a league, it's not about sponsorship. A league cannot live on sponsorship. A league needs to have investors, deep-pocketed investors, and a good media deal. Sponsorships are not what is going to
Avec
make
du
the league
recul, est-ce
survive.
que vous avez le sentiment que c'était une bonne...
So, with hindsight, the Monday morning quarterbacking, do you think it was a good agreement? Would you sign this onto the same agreement again today?
I don't know all the details of the specifics of all the clauses of the agreement, but I can tell you the principle of this agreement is no different than what happens throughout the world, because the aggregation of your assets is the only way to build equity in your game.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Sebastien. I go now to the New Democrats. Peter Julian. Peter, 6 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to start off by saying, as a former soccer coach, how important it is for Canada Soccer to be transparent, how important it is for Canada Soccer to ensure that children and athletes are safe, how important it is for Canada Soccer to reflect fundamental Canadian values. We saw with Hockey Canada an inability or unwillingness to answer key questions, and I'm disturbed by the fact that Mr. Housefather's direct questions around salary and compensation have not been answered by our witnesses. The allegations of six-figure or seven-figure incomes I find disturbing when you think that parents right across the country are paying in to Canada Soccer programs and are expecting that Canada Soccer will be transparent in its finances and ensure as well that their kids are safe. Now, I want to go beyond the allegations around the salaries to allegations around gifts, and wanted to ask you, Mr. Bontis, what is the total value of the gifts you've received from all sources in the past year?
I can actually tell you that the gifts that we actually give to our directors and have given to our directors since I started at Canada Soccer for the past 11 years amount to approximately $250 per year and consist of a Christmas gift, which is primarily the sponsor. For example, we have currently Nike right now, so it'll be Nike polos or jackets or pants. Those are the value of the gifts that we have on an annual basis, gifted at Christmas time.
From all sources, from FIFA, from all sources. That is the value?
Correct.
Okay. Can you confirm, as our witnesses did last week, that Canada Soccer paid over $11,000 for new suits for yourself and other board members?
I can confirm that a couple years back, when I was elected president, that I had been wearing a suit that was issued to me for 10 full years. The suit was in very bad shape. We travel a lot as directors. I think I wore it on average 30 times a year over 10 years. That's 300 times. It was shredded. It was in disrepair. So the idea was that we would get new suits. The request was made to the Office of the General Secretary. The Office of the General Secretary then negotiated. The suits were for all 14 directors of the board, and they amounted to $791 each. The suits were custom suits with Canada Soccer branding, jacket, pants,
I'm going to cut you
tie,
off
puff.
there, but I think we would agree $11,000 is a lot more than $250. Can you confirm as well that when you travel business class? We've had testimony to the effect that our athletes, who do an extraordinary job, were in the back of the plane in regular class while our administrators were traveling in business class. When you travel, do you travel business class?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The president of Canada Soccer may choose to travel in business class if the flight is 3 hours or longer. In the 9 years prior to me being president, in the last couple of years, I flew economy class. When we made a bid for the FIFA World Cup in 2018 in Moscow, I flew economy class.
Confirm that you do fly business class, and you are confirming that the players fly economy. I would like to go back to the testimony of Christine Sinclair, on March 9th, where she said that the women's national team, the year they won Olympic gold, found out that the men's national team players were earning more than 5 times what a women's national team player was earning. Can you confirm that figure, that our women's national team, the year they won Olympic gold, they were earning 1/5 of what the men's national team was earning?
Can I clarify, Madam Chair, with your permission, a remark that was made earlier that the women only fly economy class? That is not true. In recent months, the women flew business class to competitions in Australia, and in November in competitions to Brazil. So with regards to the compensation, I think it would be best for the CFO of Canada Soccer to answer that question. He would have that information more readily available than myself.
Mr. Heffernan, can you respond to that testimony that we've heard?
Could you just quickly repeat the numbers you had?
5 times the women's national team was earning 1/5 what men's national team players were earning in the year they won Olympic gold.
I'd have to get back in the exact calculation, but with the restitution payments, I think that math would not actually come out to be the same number that they've reported.
I also want Mr. Heffernan, for you to confirm what we found out last week. We had testimony at the time from Mr. Cochrane saying that all your filings had been done by Soccer Canada, Canada Soccer.
30 seconds.
It turned out not to be the case. Can you confirm that this week you filed financial statements for 9 years in arrears that had not been filed up to that moment by Canada Soccer?
Right. Just a small correction: the filings were made, but they were they had deficiencies in them. Yes, the financial statements were filed this week for the 9 years that were outstanding, although that we had published them on our websites for practicing the last few years.
Thank you for confirming that. I want to move on to...
Thank you, Pete. Thank you, Peter. I'm sorry you are 30 seconds over time. Sorry about that. You can come back to it in your next round. Thank you. We now go to the second round. It's a 5-minute round, and I will begin with Mr. Shields for the Conservatives.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We've got 3 people here today. You've heard the testimony that we've had before us that came from the Women's Soccer and some other people. We had Hockey Canada here, and they didn't give us some answers, and eventually their whole board resigned. You must have some understanding of what the public's view of Soccer Canada is. What do you think your view is? What do you think it is? What do you think the public thinks of you? You sitting in those positions, all 3 of you.
I'll start first there. Thank you for the comment. And through the chair, it's been 7 years since I've been at Canada Soccer. I've been 7 years as president of CONCACAF. So with respect to anything to do with Canada Soccer, other than obviously they're a member of our confederation, I haven't been on the board for 7 years.
Thinking of this board.
Who are you addressing the question?
I addressed it to all 3 of them.
All right. So perhaps
Mr. Bontis?
Sure. Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. The sentiment out there is confusing because this is a multi-layered, very, very complex negotiation. I've been criticized online and personally with the abuse that me and my family received about pay equity, which I don't understand because I have come out quite clear that I am in 100% support of pay equity. In fact, the agreement that we sent, the proposal that we sent to the men and women in June of 2022 clearly articulates what we mean by pay equity. It means equity for the playing of games in terms of the price, the bonus structure.
Appreciate that. And I think that indicates the problem you don't understand. Mr. Heffernan.
I think that there are mixed views. I think there are times when we are at the World Cup where we've got people celebrating the sport, when we're having winning gold medals, we've got people celebrating that. But at the same time, I also think the public also criticizes us as we continue to work on the collective bargaining agreements.
Right, what you just last said. So you've got a organizational, which we're looking at the organizational transfer charts and how it works. You've got that you can't be the president unless you've been on the board for a year. Are you suggesting that that should stay? Mr. Bontis, would you have that stay?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Given that I'm no longer with Canada Soccer, I don't know what should stay or shouldn't stay. I can tell you that it is a very, very monumental task to be president of this organization, even if it is a volunteer position. So I do appreciate, I think, the spirit with which that rule was put in place way before my time, which was that you probably needed some experience as a director or as a vice president. I can also tell you that including myself, the previous president before me, Victor, and then the previous president before Victor, going back now maybe, 15 years, every president was a vice president prior, because I think that's the type of succession planning that's necessary only from an intellectual capital perspective, not from a political perspective. But I do understand that the members have put in a recommendation to the governance committee to remove that stipulation so that anybody at all 18 years and older with a background check can be nominated for president of Canada Soccer starting next year.
I think what I hear in the sense is when we talked with Hockey Canada, they finally realized that if the public's going to support this board and support soccer as we believe the grassroots people in this country do, that it's time for significant change, because I'm not sure that the people are going to believe whatever you're doing unless we have significant change. That agreement out there is going to be, it's going to be problematic for years to come. When you say you're going to try to change it, what power do you have to do that? There's no clause to renegotiate in there.
Mr. Shields, would you direct your question to someone specific?
Yep. Mr. Maglani?
I think that is a question for Canada Soccer in terms of the negotiation of the deal. That was something that I was at Canada Soccer in terms of the negotiation of the deal that you're referring to.
Okay, Mr. Heffron?
The deal was duly approved by the board of directors. In my role, I'm to respect those decisions and execute the decisions of the board of directors.
30 seconds.
Where's the review clause that you think you have the power to change it?
As indicated in my opening comments, were the three things that I thought needed to be renegotiated were the length of the term, the unilateral extension, and the upside of the revenue.
Thank you.
Where's the clause to renegotiate?
We're running out of time.
Other than unless they become under default through the resolution process, there isn't one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shields. And I now go to the Liberals for Lisa Hefner. Ms. Hefner, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the witnesses for being here today. And I'll start with Nick Bontis. And just full disclosure, Nick, we go back many years, of course, in Hamilton. When my years at CHCH, you were a main business commentator related to your role at McMaster University. I don't know if you still play the same role, but Bontis on Business was a regular segment on CHCH, and we've spoken over the years also about your involvement in soccer. And so I have to say it was with great disappointment that I heard some of the comments that Christine Sinclair heard from you at this committee, in part because you're also involved at the local level in the smaller clubs and in the kids that are coming up. And the young girls who are playing soccer on Hamilton Mountain, getting together at Mohawk Sports Park, they look up to people like Christine Sinclair. This is someone who is at the top of her game in the world. Canadians, she is a hero to so many Canadians. And so what message do you think it sends to those young kids playing soccer when they see someone at the top of her game and still feeling disrespected by the board at Canada Soccer?
Thank you for the question, and in full disclosure, it's great to see you again and interact with you again, so I appreciate the question. Madam Chair, as I mentioned in my opening statement, I regret that statement. Christine Sinclair was one of the first athletes I met when I entered Canada Soccer in 2012. In fact, I was head of delegation in their preparation tour for the Olympics. And I want to share this memory with you because it still resonates with me today. I believe that the greatest moment in football history in our country was when Christine Sinclair scored a hat trick in the semifinals of the Olympics that summer. It was a beacon of light for me. Without getting into the details of the game, I think we remember a 6-second goalkeeping rule by the Norwegian referee, but we'll put that aside. And in all the interactions that I had with Christine from that moment on, I tried to do my best to actually speak to her whenever I had a very free moment, just to tell her how much she meant to me. I had the great opportunity as vice president and as president to present Christine with many, many awards. The greatest goal scorer in international soccer history being one of them. Including, the achievements at the Olympics. So to answer your question to the honorable member, yeah, it's regretful when I not only am, a Hamiltonian, but I am a coach. I was a youth local coach in Hamilton. I try to instill the values that are important as a coach. And I can tell you that I take that role very, very seriously. I coached very, very young kids, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old at the time that I was a coach.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate it. And it is too bad, considering that you have that respect for Christine Sinclair, that she did not feel respected by you. But I would like to move on in the couple of minutes I have left to the situation of Bob Berarda in Canada Soccer. And this is something we've heard in other sports where, predators face accusations. They leave their organization without being fully investigated, move to another part of the country, and continue to teach. And this is someone who first faced allegations in the mid-2000s and wasn't convicted until just recently. He was allowed to continue coaching soccer. What has Canada Soccer done to prevent this type of thing from happening again?
Thank you for the question. It's a very serious and important question. And Madam Chair, I would like to have that question answered more wholesome and fulsome by Victor Montagliani, considering that he was present during the Berarda case. I was not.
That's fine. Montagliani?
Yeah, no, that's fine. In terms of the specifics of the Berarda case, back in 2008, the committee, the executive committee, which is a committee of the board of 8 people, considered the allegation against Mr. Berarda as it related to inappropriate texting. The matter was investigated by an independent ombudswoman and legal counsel. There was 2 conference calls that dealt with this matter. One was to suspend Mr. Berarda. The second was to hire an investigator. The second conference call, weeks later, dealt with the recommendation by the investigator through our president to confirm that there would be no police undertaking in this matter, unfortunately, that there was also the texting that was confirmed that was inappropriate for a coach-player relationship, to your point, and that also that the identity of the players or player involved, as well as the details of the texting, was not revealed to the committee because of privacy and confidentiality
30
issues.
seconds.
Thank you. With respect to the specifics of coaching, up until recently, back to 2008, the only risk management tool that a club had was a police background check. If you pass the police background check, you could coach in Canada. Unfortunately, that is not a system that is tenable, to your point. I think recently there have been changes. I think Canada Soccer can speak to that. Some of those changes were started in effect in 2012 under the guidelines of Sport Canada. And those are some of the things that I think the whole industry of player welfare and safe sport needs to change, so that you can't just rely on a police background check, because if the police do not interact or do what needs to be done, obviously
Thank
this
you,
person...
Thank you, Mr. Montagliani. You can expand on that in a future question. I now go to the Bloc Québécois. Sébastien Lemire, 2.5 minutes, please, Sébastien.
Merci, Madame la...
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Heffernan, you've been in your position for a while. Pricewater Canada, were they aware of the agreement with CSP? And for how long has Pricewaterhouse Canada been your auditor? And for what financial year do we have documentation about the closing of the agreement?
The Pricewaterhouse PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, has been our auditor since 2007, from when we tendered after I shortly joined the organization. Yes, they are fully aware of the CSP agreement and reviewed it in great detail.
And we hear mention of a legacy farm and a level of familiarity with Sports Canada officers. There is a fund, supposedly 28 million, available. Could you give us any details about this, or tell us about what use was made of this legacy fund?
I need a greater understanding of what you're referring to, because I don't understand or know of any fund of $28 million for legacy. If I have further details, I might be able to refocus what it is that you're asking.
Very well. We'll get back to it. Mr. Montagliani, given everything we heard from the McLaren report, do you still think that you have legitimacy to hold your positions at FIFA and CONCACAF, or to manage the 2026 National League Championship?
Question, Madam Chair. I think the McLaren report was quite clear in terms of the individual roles of the people involved. I was part of a committee of 8 people that had 2 conference calls to make the decisions that were made. It was very clear in terms of what was done, in terms of the report of the independent ombudswoman. I think it also, the McLaren's report, as I volunteered to discuss with them, the McLaren's report did identify institutional gaps with respect to policies, which I think now have been addressed starting in 2012, but also addressed recently by Canada Soccer, by the hiring of Alison Forsyth, to ensure that those policy gaps are no longer there.
Thank you, Mr. Montagliani. We have run out of time, and I'm going to go to Peter Julian for the New Democrats. Peter, you have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Mr. Bontis, I asked this question last week. While you were president of Canada Soccer, how many allegations of sexual abuse came to your attention and were investigated?
In my role as director of Canada Soccer starting in 2012, I was not aware of the Berardi case until there were further allegations sometime around 2019, 2020. I don't know exactly when there were some more further allegations. Since that period of time and since I was president, I was not made aware of any other safe sport sexual allegation.
No allegations of sexual abuse anywhere came to your attention as president of Canada Soccer? I find that surprising, but I'll move on to Mr. Montagliani. You mentioned the Beretta case as one of inappropriate texting, but he has been sent to prison for sexual assault. This is a profound crime that took place within the organization with players that were to be protected by the organization. How could that failure have happened? Were you not aware, or when did you become aware of the fact that he was committing this horrific and egregious crime of sexual assault?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Going back to 2008, and as the McLaren's report outlined, we only dealt with the sole allegation of his inappropriate texting at a national team camp in Vancouver. And that was the process of that investigation. With respect to what he has subsequently been charged with, which came in light in 2019, 2020, those predated his time at the Canada Soccer Association when, he committed those things while working at the grassroots or at private academies in British Columbia. In 2008, nobody was aware. I was certainly not aware of anything previously that Mr. Beretta had done, nor was to my knowledge, the committee was aware of it. And by the looks of it, neither was the investigators. This didn't unfortunately come forward till the victims had come forward in 2019, 2020, which led to the police being engaged and ultimately Mr. Beretta being charged.
Thank you. I think we're up. Your time is up now, Peter. And I go to the Conservatives again, to Mr. Shields for 5 minutes. Martin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rachel Thomas here taking this
Oh, Rachel, you're going to do this. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. There have been questions with regards to salary. There have been questions with regards to where you fly on an airplane, and all of these questions really are technically yours and yours alone to have this information. I think what instigates the questions, though, is not necessarily that the number is important or that the seat number is important, but rather what it insinuates or what it symbolizes. And that is to say that there is this overall picture that I believe is being painted with regards to Canada Soccer that shows a couple of things. One, that there is this enormous elitism at the top of the organization, that there is this leadership group that is out of touch with the reality of the players, and in particular, the players that are on the women's team. There is this notion or this understanding that those at the top are being put before the players themselves, which is a problem. It's a problem for the players, it's a problem for the fans, it's a problem for Canadians, it's a problem for the sport. Further to that, I think the other thing that is being communicated to the public is that this is an organization run by men for men, that the women are not being fairly compensated, and that comes down not only to equal pay, but also equal opportunity, equal treatment, and equal resources. And so we have an organization run by an elite few who are men, who run this organization for men, and it is to the disadvantage of the players as a whole, but in particular the women. That's a problem. We have a deal that was signed between Canada Soccer and Canada Soccer Business. And when we look at this deal, it smells fishy. And I think that's where these questions come into play today. Because what we want to know is the terms of this deal. But there has been a refusal to be transparent about those terms. But we do know a few things based on what we've heard from players and based on what we've seen reported in the media. And so we know that this is a deal that was signed for 10 years. We know that there's the opportunity to renew this deal for another 10 years. We know that there was very little transparency and therefore zero accountability with regards to this deal. And we're confused as to why this deal was signed because it just doesn't make sense. So my first question, I should say, is this. Mr. Bontis, did you gain in any way, personally or professionally, from signing this deal?
Thank you for the question, Madam Chair. Absolutely not. I did not gain at all in signing this deal as a director. I can address your other comments if you like at this point.
That's okay. There was no other question, Mr. Bontis. Thank you. My second question is, was there any part of this deal signed between Canada Soccer and Canada Soccer Business? Was there any part of that deal that was done as a favor for the founders of the Canada Soccer Business?
Thank you for the question. Again, Madam Chair, absolutely not. There's no negotiating contractual agreements that are done as favors for founding members.
I would turn those same questions then over to Mr. Heffernan. Was any part of that deal signed as a favor toward the founders of Canada Soccer Business?
Not that I'm aware of.
And did you have anything to gain personally or professionally from that deal being signed?
No.
Did anyone on the board have anything to benefit from that deal personally or professionally?
Not that I'm aware of.
Mr. Bontis, are you aware of any?
Thank you for the question. No, I'm not aware of anybody on the board who had anything to gain. In fact, in the minutes that were provided to your your committee, there was one individual on the board who recused himself from any of those discussions because he was involved with another competing club.
Mr. Heffernan, this deal was signed for 10 years with the opportunity to renew for another 10 years. Can you point me to another similar sports organization that has signed a deal like this?
Not that I can think of.
Why did you sign it?
I didn't sign it.
Mr. Bontis, why did you sign it?
I'm sorry, I did not sign it either.
No, I apologize. I should be asking why the organization signed it.
Well, the organization supported the contract. And to your question about the 10-year and 10-year, there is an opportunity within the first break of the 10 years to renegotiate the guaranteed payment that's stipulated in the contract.
It's 10 years. So what you're saying is, actually, it's basically supposed to be a 20-year deal, but we're going to give it the first 10, and maybe somewhere in there might be an opportunity to have a bit of a conversation along the way. But really, the intention then seems to be 20 years.
Ms. Thomas, I will give leeway for an answer, but we're past the 5 minutes. Go ahead.
The frame of reference, at least for me personally, in 2017 and 2018, when we were negotiating the deal, was that we need a long time to actually provide resources for a league to sustain itself. 3 previous men's leagues, CSL, CNSL, CPSL, historically, all went belly up within that 10-year period. So
that's why you sign a short deal and renew.
Thank you, Dr. Bontis. Thank you, Ms. Thomas. I'm going to go to the Liberals for 5 minutes. Anthony Housefather.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to continue on Rachel's line of questioning. So this deal, Mr. Bontis, you stated that there's an opportunity to renegotiate the base amount, which is essentially it's a guaranteed amount, but it can't increase. It's basically, despite the men's team qualifying for the World Cup, the women's team winning the Olympics, you get no bump up in the amounts that you negotiated for the first 10 years. And then in the second 10 years, if you don't agree on an amount with CSB, there's a fixed amount that's in the contract that's barely an escalation from what was in the first 10 years. As opposed to in the United States, where they had a similar deal, it went up to $30 million at the end. Here, you have almost no escalation. So what Rachel said is actually the case. It's an unbelievable deal. We cannot understand how anybody could sign an agreement that fixes in pricing for 20 years, no matter how well the soccer teams do. So let me ask a different question, if it's okay, Mr. Bontis. I understand you didn't sign the deal. Mr. Reid signed the deal. Last meeting, I had a number of questions about when this agreement was approved. And the representatives of Canada Soccer told us that it was approved in March of 2018, and I pointed them to a board meeting in December 2018 where it was clear the deal had not been approved because the board had revisited, the deal was being renegotiated, and the board had lots of things, mandates to give to the negotiating committee. And so they said, well, there was a conference call that happened later in December that wasn't minuted. Then the agreement was signed as of January 1st. Mr. Bontis, do you remember at what date Mr. Reid signed the agreement?
I don't remember the exact date that the agreement was signed, but you are correct in your characterization that the board agreed to the deal on March 27th. A news release went public on our website on March 28th. The meeting that you're speaking about for November, as is in the minutes, which you have a copy of, were for smaller, unsubstantive issues having to deal with
Mr. Bontis, let me
misspelling and
correct you. They
grammar.
were not for smaller, not substantive issues. As Mr. Heffernan stated, the negotiating committee was renegotiating 4 very important parts of the agreement, including broadcasting rights, term and renewal, etc., signing authority on sponsorship and broadcast agreements, which is why it's mysterious that we didn't get minutes where the board actually then approved the agreement. But suddenly, after the last meeting, the board minutes of February 7th, 2019 showed up. And the board there fully adopted the agreement, meaning that they clearly didn't consider the 2018 motion to be valid because it was completely re-adopted, authorizing the signing of the representation agreement and the funding agreement. Do you recall that meeting in February that suddenly showed up as minutes that we never had before?
So I can't speak to why there was a clerical error. I'm not with Canada Soccer anymore. It's a regrettable error. What I can speak to is that
But you're on the minutes as having attended the meeting, Mr. Bontis.
Yes.
Do you recall having
February
attended
7th.
a board meeting on February the 7th, 2019, where the board adopted resolutions authorizing the signature of the agreement?
Yes, the February 7th meeting was a reaffirmation that the contract was signed.
That is not what any of the motions say. The motion says the entering into by the corporation to the representation agreement dated January 1, 2019, substantially in the form submitted to the directors, blah, 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 is hereby authorized and approved. It doesn't refer back to 2018. It doesn't refer back to a previous approval. It's a new approval that suddenly has appeared. And so let me ask a different question, Mr. Bontis. Mr. Reid signed the agreement by himself. In the bylaws of Canada Soccer, it states that any agreement needs to be signed by the executive secretary and by a second signatory, either the vice president or the president. Did the executive secretary of Canada Soccer ever sign the agreements? Because I don't have a signature on it.
I don't recall. I did not sign it as vice president, but I don't know if there was a
Mr. Reid's
page with the general secretary.
And it's a governance issue. Mr. Heffernan, you are still the CFO at Canada Soccer. Can you explain, did the executive secretary, as is required under Canada Soccer bylaws, including the bylaws that I found dating back to that time in 2019, states clearly in 1.10 that the executive secretary needs to sign? Did he ever sign that agreement?
No.
Thank you. Let me ask another question then. Why, and this is a very important question, why did Canada Soccer, I understand you wanted a men's professional league to be set up so we could bid on the World Cup. Why were the women's assets included in an agreement that made no commitment to ever set up a women's professional league? Mr. Bontis? Sir.
My apologies for the mute, but thank you for the question. I would want to pass the question on to Victor because he had that parameter in the original proposal that was put forward to the board early on in 2017.
Which was after the date that he left as president. When I wanted to tell everybody that in the minutes, you see Mr. Matigliani's presence at board meetings long after he left as president of Canada Soccer. In fact, they tried to pass a resolution authorizing him to attend all board meetings afterwards. So, Mr. Matigliani, sure. Tell us, after you left as president, how you were involved in the negotiations of this agreement and how you ended up with these terms.
Yeah, after I left, thank you for the question. After I left the Canada Soccer Association, I wasn't involved at all with any of these negotiations. My attendance to a board meeting was upon the request of the president, and it's common, I get requested by a lot of my member associations, where I attend for the first 5-10 minutes to give an update on
Mr. Bontis just referred the question to you, saying you had more knowledge than him, who was sitting on the executive the entire time and was the vice president at the time it was signed. Very telling. Thank you, Mr. Matigliani.
Thank you very much. We now come to the end of our question and answer session because we're going to have to take some time to go in camera. I want to thank the witnesses for coming.
Madam Chair.
Yes?
Sorry, there seems to be consensus around the table that perhaps you could give each party another 2 to 3 minute round. We believe that would still allow for the time that's needed for the business.
Then is that clear? Is there anyone objecting to that? I am not able to tell what the agreement is. Is everyone in agreement? Any objection? Are there any hands up, clerk? No,
there's no
I
hands
don't
up.
see
Everybody
any.
seems in agreement.
Good. Well, then let's move on then, and we can give everyone, I think there are 4. We can give everyone 2 minutes each. I shall go to the Conservatives. I don't know who's going to take that. For 2 minutes, let me know.
Right. Yeah, I can go.
Kevin,
Okay.
2 minutes.
Or do you want to go?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Who's going?
Merci, Madame.
Mr. Martel, thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to put my question to Mr. Bontis. Despite all your goodwill, sir, why wasn't pay equity already instituted?
Madam Chair, the big fundamental difference between the women's national team and the men's national team upon my arrival as president was that the women's team had a collective bargaining agreement already in place. So they're in the process right now of renewing the collective bargaining agreement, whereas the men did not. They negotiated based on camps. To promise pay equity now complicates the negotiation because all 3 parties, the men's team, the women's team, and Canada Soccer, have to come together for an agreement. So it was only upon further communication with the men, and they've only created a players association. They created a legal representation and a players association only in I think it was Labor Day of 2022. That's when I found out. So the truth of the matter is that the women had a collective bargaining agreement and were registered as a players association through the province of Ontario. The men had not been. Only in September did they do that, which then allowed us as Canada Soccer to be able to negotiate and in good spirit, all 3 parties, the men's team, the women's team, and Canada Soccer, have continued all the communications from September moving forward. I've since left now in the last month, but my understanding is that those communications, obviously through Sean's testimony, continue.
30 seconds.
But the women's team, nevertheless, was convinced that equal pay wasn't a real deal, that they weren't getting the same amounts as the men's team. You said that yourself.
Well, I can assure you, thank you for the question, Madam Chair, the proposal that Canada Soccer presented to both teams guaranteeing equal pay is detailed. It's publicly available. It's been reported by the media. And in the World Cup prize money as well will be shared. And it's not percentage terms, just to clarify. It's dollar for dollar, making both the men's and the women's teams among the highest paid national teams in the world. If you take the fact that the men's team has already competed in Qatar and the women have not yet competed in Australia, but even if the women, and of course I want the women to go as far as possible, but assuming the women only play those 3 games in Australia.
Please wrap it up, Mr. Bontis.
Each of the players would be estimated to receive $135,000 as part of that compensation just for the World Cup prize money.
Thank you. I now go to the Liberals. Who would take this? Is it?
I will, Madam Chair. Thank you. I want to just come back briefly to the Barbara Arda case because I think it's important for Canadians who are watching to understand what happened. Barbara Arda was the U20 national women's coach until 2008, and in November 2022, he was sent to prison for the sexual assault of underage players. In 2008, Canada Soccer basically spun it as a mutual decision to part ways when his departure was announced as leaving as U20 national coach, and explained the move had to do with Berardo wanting time to attend to his own health and family and wished him well in the future. In the independent McLaren report published in July 2022, the report states that the communication that characterized Berardo's departure as being in the mutual interests of both parties without so much as addressing the harassment was a gross mischaracterization of the circumstances and failed the victims of the harassment, their teammates, and the organization as a whole. There was a robust harassment policy on the books of Canada Soccer when complaints were raised, but the executive failed to follow it at several levels, which are damningly delineated in the McLaren report. And McLaren also found that there was only a small cadre of individuals at Canada Soccer who even knew about the complaints. Other executives in the board were kept in the dark. No trace of the case exists in any minutes. A staff member interviewed as part of the McLaren investigation said, "This is what troubles me. There are no paper trails. Everything was held behind closed doors, and there is no record of what was done." In 2021, FIFA became interested in the handling of the sexual misconduct complaint, Canada Soccer carefully altered the story, claiming the entire board was involved in the swift termination of Berarda, and that obviously wasn't the case. When you were asked, Mr. Montagliani, by the Ethics Commissioner or the Ethics Commission at FIFA about this mischaracterizing message, you said you had nothing to do with it or you couldn't remember being a part of it. Is that true?
I was never asked anything by, sorry, Madam Chair. I was never asked anything by the FIFA Ethics Committee. The FIFA Ethics Committee made a clear statement that their investigation had to deal with the individuals, Mr. Berarda specifically being involved. So I was never asked anything by the FIFA Ethics Committee.
You were never asked anything. Interesting. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry.
The time is up, Anthony. Sorry. And now I'm going to go to Mr. Lemire for 2 minutes, please, Sébastien.
Madame la Présidente, c'est moi qui...
Madam Chair, I will be taking those 2 minutes. Very well. Madam Chair, it's not because I want to give our guests a break, really, but I'll take advantage of having the floor. Yes, it is indeed Mr. Champoux, Madam Chair.
Merci.
Begin.
Alors donc, je vais...
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I will switch topics, change the topic for a few moments, Madam Chair. And it's, as I was saying, it's certainly not to give a break to our witnesses who indeed have a good deal of information to share with us. I would like to put forward a motion about freedom of expression. We can see that culture is neglected, and culture is often the first victim of restrictions of freedom of speech and media and out in public, and people are afraid to speak openly, afraid of being censored. And I think this is a matter of grave concern for all Canadians. So I would like to underscore that books have been burned out of school libraries, that the Michelangelo by Michelangelo's David has been censored in another country, and Speak Right, a poem by Michel Lalonde, has been banned from a school in Three Rivers because the N-word is in it. So this being the context, based on Section our Constitution, we undertake a study of 6 meetings at least to discuss this matter, and I would like to be able to debate this motion at our next meeting.
And the motion, Martin, study of 6 weeks, 6 meetings to...
Une étude de 6...
Yes, a 6-meeting study on freedom of speech and the means that the government should have available, the actions the government should take to ensure that freedom of speech is respected.
Now a motion on the floor. And do you wish you still have about...
C'est un avis de motion, Madame la Présidente.
It's I'm giving notice of a motion.
Okay, so you don't wish to discuss it right now. Thank you.
Merci.
All right. Thank you.
So I now go to Mr. Julian. Peter, for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I've been disappointed with the answers today. I wanted to go back to Mr. Heffernan and ask him, as Chief Financial Officer, what evaluation he did around the issue of the contract with Canada Soccer Business to estimate the value of the rights that were being accorded to CSB. Were there financial figures studied by the board, and did they include projections of the rise in value of those rights over time and over the period of the contract?
The analysis I did on the board evaluated the terms of the contract and forecasted in comparison to what our current sponsorships were at the time. The guarantee was higher than what we were currently receiving. And the long-term forecast, it's really a trend line because it doesn't take any actions. As to the increase in valuation, that exceeds my my expertise, as I am not a certified business valuator on anticipating future growth.
Okay. Well, I would like to ask through you, Madam Chair, that Canada Soccer make that evaluation available to us. I will say this, across the country we have parents that are providing money that go through to Canada Soccer. We have not seen transparency. And the words that Christine Sinclair spoke before this committee, I think, ring true. She said on March 9th, Canada Soccer's approach on finances has reflected a culture of secrecy and obstruction. I think it's fair to say that this is a problem in terms of the finances and the lack of answers we've had today. It's also a concern around the allegations of sexual abuse and how Canada Soccer treats these issues. Alors, Madame la Présidente, j'espère bien.
So, Madam Chair, I hope that we will be able to discuss this fully, to get to the bottom of this, to get the information that Canadians need to have, because we do need transparency, and I think that that's what's missing here today.
Madam Chair, if I could just correct a point on premise.
This is
you referred to it as an evaluation. It's a trend line.
Thank you. Thank you.
I would still
All right.
like to the committee to receive the information the Chief Financial Officer has just revealed to us.
Thank you very much, Peter.
Madam Chair,
I think
can I just add my
time
name?
is up.
Is the speaking done? Can I add my name to?
The speaking is now done. If we are to follow through what everyone agreed to, Mr. Waugh suggesting.
Can I just ask a question to Mr. Julian?
It takes time to go in camera. I'm sorry, no, the time is up, or we will not finish what we're supposed to do and what the agenda for the day says. So I shall thank the witnesses once more. I shall ask that the trend line be sent to the clerk as promised. And I want to thank the witnesses for coming. And with that, I will suspend so that we can go in camera. Thank you.